Welcome to the Authority File. I'm Bill Mickey, your host and the editorial director at Choice. My guest for this series is Stephen Rosado. He's the general manager of Overdrive Professional, the academic and corporate services division of the ebook and distribution platform, which launched back in the spring of 2020. Given Overdrive Professional's perspective on the library market, we'll be discussing trends Stephen has noticed with academic libraries, especially in the last year during COVID. In this third episode, we talk about how Overdrive has been helping libraries secure funds from the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, and how lending models factor into that plan. So lately, Overdrive has been working with organizations including IMLS, chief officers of state library agencies, and its publisher partners to see how libraries can avail themselves of the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, for digital resources. Can you tell us more about what ARPA can do for libraries and what you've learned from your discussion with those stakeholders?
I have learned it is very confusing.
Yeah.
So I'm as part of Overdrive Professional. My view is limited in looking at it for the higher education folks.
Right. Okay.
I have been fortunate to sit in on weekly meetings with both our public library team and our K through 12 team. It's a lot more straightforward for those folks. That money is being dispersed on a state level, and it's to agency like the public libraries already know like who they deal with, where they get funding, and K through 12. So it is much easier for them to navigate. On the higher education side, there is a lot of money out there. I can say at least half the money is going to be dedicated towards grants for students and financial aid. So the biggest upside for me, and I think for the academic market, is there is going to be a lot of money from the government going into the academic market. So universities will be able to avail themselves for specific needs on whether it's technology or lost revenue, healthcare protections, to prevent a similar sort of a disaster. But I think the good news is where so many budgets have been cut, and I think they will find themselves more whole than they were.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's going to be more money flowing in from the government through universities to let them to be stabilized, and it won't be quite as stark as what people were worried about. I have a son who's in college who ended up, he didn't pay for his housing because he was home in his bedroom,
Right.
commuting to Penn State from Connecticut.
Yeah. Is this going to help with purchasing constraints, or is this money that's kind of relieving pressure in other areas?
I've been doing some of this research and we're going to put together a resource page to go through, because there's the original CARES Act, which was passed underneath the Trump administration, but there's still money that people could apply to, even though a lot of those deadlines have lapsed. ARPA has also HERES, which is the higher education. I can't remember what it all stands for, but there is specific guidance on being able to apply for whether you are trying to recoup lost revenue, if you are going to be supplying technology for remote learning to enable distance learning. In particular, they want to sort of level that playing field. So if you're going to be adding a resource like Overdrive, for example, or just supplying professors with Zoom accounts and bandwidth and, as far as Wi-Fi and that sort of stuff.
Okay.
There is going to be recourse for a lot of universities. I'm assuming, and from the conversations I have had, each university typically has professional grant writers on staff that are probably navigating this. The shortest advice I could have is like, if you are, a library director, is just to make sure that your voice is being heard and what you're eligible for. That is the best advice I could offer up.
Okay. It's, sticking with purchasing, wondering if you or Overdrive Professional have any longer term perspective on library purchasing abilities and any trends you might be seeing there.
Well, just purely on the content side, just like by genre, we've been doing sort of deeper dives on it. It was interesting to see like how social justice titles have just exploded. Makes sense, but in 2020, I think it was up something like 300 and some odd %, which is over the previous couple of years. And we usually see, 20-30% spikes here or there, depending on, certainly politics have been very popular over the last 4 years. Ironically enough, like biographies overall have been down a bit, which I guess maybe if it's falls under politics as well, comes up a little bit differently.
Yeah.
But social justice for the last 3 years has been one of the top 10 growth areas genre-wise for us. And just to go from like 30% to 50% to like 300 some odd percent in 2021, it's probably more required reading in a lot of courses, certainly in political science. I think people are just genuinely interested.
Yeah.
And I've certainly heard that from a lot of accounts that I talk to, that they are, a lot of times Overdrive is there for sort of pleasure reading and literature. And that's one of the things that they've been trying to supply students with.
Mm-hmm. I'm wondering, going back to ARPA real quick, if you can kind of situate Overdrive's lending models within sort of the ARPA regulations or compliance factors. I mean,
that is something that we are working through, and it is a hot button issue, particularly on the public library side, because if you're going to get metered access in particular, and let's say it's going to be about a 16-month window, and it's a 24-month title, it needs to be prorated. So Overdrive is addressing that. It's something we need to do with the publishers. A few publishers have already opted in. We anticipate most will.
Okay.
It's some gymnastics on our side, just to make sure that when people go in, they buy it and it's available for the price and the right time. But if you're buying just, perpetual access, which Overdrive terms one copy, one user, you'll be able to access that and make that part of your collection.
Okay, so has perpetual access shifted at all in this environment, or has it kind of remained?
No, it's just considered like, a consumable item, I guess.
Yeah.
Like if you're buying food, you're buying food. It doesn't have to be prorated. It's a terrible analogy, but...
You just heard from Stephen Rosado. He's the General Manager of Overdrive Professional, the academic and corporate services division of the ebook and distribution platform. Overdrive Professional is the sponsor of this series. Join us next week for our final episode of this series when we continue our conversation about the American Rescue Plan Act and how Overdrive is advocating on behalf of libraries with its publishing partners.
They're so used to perpetual access. Like, we just want to have it, we just want to own it. But sometimes we offer something called cost per circ. So you can, if it's Clara Barton Publishing, they have 200 titles on nursing, you can have they're all $50 each. That'll cost you $10,000 to have that collection. If you have it under that cost per circ model, you'd only pay anytime any of those titles were circulated. So, you might only circ 50 of those titles in a semester, you're only paying $5 per circ, so you're only paying, $250, opposed to investing $10,000 in a collection.
Mm-hmm.
That's something we've seen a lot of, adding those CPC titles, and we also let the libraries put in sort of guardrails, if you will. So they could say, like, hey, we have $1,000 per semester for CPC titles. Lets them offer enormous amount of content they might not otherwise have because they don't have to pay for it, and they're only paying for what circs.
If you like what you hear, rate us or give us a review on your podcast platform of choice. As always, sponsorship and advertising for the Authority File podcast are handled by Choice's advertising manager, Pam Marino, and all of our episodes are produced by Choice's senior digital media producer, Mark Dirks, and digital media assistant, Sabrina Kofer. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.